Ladies and gentlemen, if you could take your seats, we're going to get started with the next session. So good afternoon. For those of you I haven't met, my name is Mike Perkowski. I'm Chief Operating Officer of Microcast Communications and MuniWireless.com. And on behalf of all of us, I want to thank you all for braving the elements to come out today and spending hopefully 2 days with us. Hopefully you've already started to get a lot of value out of being here at the conference. We thank you, and we have promised that there's a lot more yet to come. So our next session is something that is a great topic for discussion, and hopefully one that will engender a lot of debate and a lot of questions. And that's this notion of business models, particularly this great discussion we have of free versus paid. Now, those are two very polar extremes of the business model equation. There's a lot of gray area in the middle, but it's also the source of a lot of emotional debate. So we want to talk about some of those things. We want to sort of surface and dispel some of the myths about paid or free and the trade-offs of one versus the other. You know what they say about there being no free lunch? Well, you know, there's a lot of truth to that. And so our speakers are going to talk to that to some degree. But we're also very sensitive to the idea that, you know, somebody has to pay for this stuff somehow, okay? And there are political entities out there called government, and they have constituencies to answer to. They're called voters. Voters don't like taxes, okay? Spending by government is, in some minds, equivalent to taxes. So we need to keep all that in mind, and obviously our speakers have a lot of experience in talking about this issue and framing it in the right context, so that for those of you who work for municipalities, those of you who are VARs or service providers who have municipalities as customers or prospects, these are going to be some of the important issues and that they're going to talk a little bit about this afternoon and be able to answer your questions. Okay, so our two speakers are going to be first Mark Myers from Cisco and Carl Nerup from AT&T. They have some very interesting points of view, and more importantly, they have some real-world experience on this. So a lot of what they're going to talk to you about deals with what they've actually been working with municipalities about. They've heard all of the arguments, pro and con, and they're going to cover all of that here today. And they're going to talk a little bit about sort of what free really means, and what when you talk about paid, what that entails as well. So we're going to start. Mark, if you wouldn't come on up and get us started, and then we'll go from there. We're also going to, after Mark's presentation, we'll be able to answer questions from some of you, and then we'll go to Carl.
Thank you, Michael.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it. So can everybody hear me okay? Yes? Okay, very good. So thank you very much, Michael. Thank you for having us with you at this summit today. Carl, I'm looking forward to hearing your presentation after we step through this. It was an interesting weekend. In as a lot of the conversation that I heard in the radio was talking about how there's a rise in the overall crime rate in middle America, and how this is kind of snuck up on a lot of the police forces, and they're looking at ways that they can address this. And it was particularly interesting as I'm looking at preparing for today's presentation, as we're talking about municipal wireless, and we're talking about the impact that technology can have in our daily lives and how it can really transform the communities. One of the key areas that a lot of people focus on is public safety. So the question went through in my head is, so how can technology help, as we start to address some of these key issues that are coming up in the communities today? And, short of going out and hiring an additional 200 police officers for each community, what are the ways that we can address this? So in the presentation, as we step through today, we are going to talk about access and opportunity. And very specifically, we're going to talk about how we can make this a viable proposition with long-term impact as we move forward. So why municipal wireless? What are the real impacts that you can have on a society? A society and a community has to run their municipal projects. The goal is, how do you do it efficiently? How do you make sure that you enable the municipal workers to get their jobs done effectively, quickly, and have access to the information that they need in order to perform their jobs wherever they happen to be? From a transportation standpoint, it's all about tracking. It's about how do we have the ability to keep track of what's happening in the intersections? How do we know the difference between a traffic accident and a public forum where we have people laying across the streets to make a political statement? How do we address that, and how do we get the appropriate resources out there? For the police, how do we get them the ability to make decisions quickly and in a fashion that gives them the access to the information that's going to help keep them safe and help keep the citizens safe. And of course, the ultimate goal is how do we make our communities more viable so that more businesses want to move into the community? How do we make it so that more citizens, see a quality of life that makes it worthwhile for them to stay in the community and spend their money and spend extra time? So this is happening throughout the country. Thousands of cities are looking at this, both in the United States as well as overseas. And this information specifically comes directly from Muni Wireless and the market report. The interesting thing is you look across the bottom is the market is growing. And the market is growing pretty dramatically. So as we take a look at the information, we see that on an annual basis, we're doubling in the overall applications. The interesting thing is, I looked at this report, was as they started talking with the municipalities and asking the CIOs what it is that they were really looking to accomplish through the integration of a municipal wireless strategy, it came back, and the number one was public safety, followed by building inspection.